All right, so these are, again, the vocab words that we have for today. Pundit is an expert in a particular subject or field who are frequently called on to give opinion to the public. So these are people that are really good at what they do, and everyone wants their opinion on this. Okay, so let's say there's a really good doctor. Maybe the entire community asks for that doctor's opinion. So that would be a pundit. Vulnerable is being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, usually physically or emotionally, which means that you allow yourself to break down any walls that you have around you, around your heart, and you let people see personal things about you. And that might hurt you, but it also might help you build relationships. Okay. So for example, if you are meeting a guy or a girl for the first time and you are going out with that person, you want to get to know that person, you tell them things on the first date that 7 months in, you tell them things that are more personal. So on the first date, you talk about, I don't know, things you like, shopping, whatever, cooking, things like that. When you've been dating for 7 months, or when you're married, or right before you get married, then you talk about things that are personal, maybe your past, your childhood, your problems. That makes you vulnerable to that person. When you tell them something that is intimate, they can hurt you, but also vulnerability can build relationships. If you don't tell them, then there's no sense of connection, right? So that's what vulnerability is. Allowing yourself to be, to let go of things and to be more open, even though it might hurt you. Condescending is thinking that you are better than someone and making that person feel bad in the way you talk to them or the way you behave around them. So someone who is condescending, let's say someone is very rich and someone is very poor, then the rich person, or someone is not as rich, right? So they're very rich, the other person isn't very rich. Then they would say, oh, you don't have that car? That's so bad, right? Or they would say it in a mean way, like, oh, you don't have that car? It's okay, not everyone can afford it. Even though the statement sounds nice, they are being condescending because they're making the other person feel bad because they don't have that money. Weeds, in this context, in the context of that we're talking about, are things that are details that are not important. So think about like the little, when you have the grass in your front lawn and there are little blades of grass that aren't very good, like weeds that is growing inside the grass, it's not very important. These are the things that you can take out from your garden, okay, in terms of physically. But when we're talking about metaphorically, or in a way that is in context of relationships, when you talk about weeds, these are things that are not important part of the conversation, okay? Promotional is realizing or relating to publicity of a product. So things that you want people to know about. For example, this is number 11, right? So for example, if you are saying that if you're selling something, then you run an ad. That ad is a promotion. It's also known as a promotion. So to promote is to make someone more aware of something, okay? Open-ended means it usually is talking about an answer, And an open-ended answer is one that you can come up with. So if a question has A, B, C, D options, then that is not an open-ended question. But if I ask you a question and you can write a paragraph, that's an open-ended question because you can tell me what you think. So there is no limit.
So there's no one correct answer.
Exactly. There's no one correct answer. Absolutely. Coherent is logical or consistent, or it goes well together. Okay. So let's say you're writing an essay and the essay is about tomato soup. So the first paragraph is on tomatoes, the second one is on sauce, and the third one is on herbs and spices. Because the entire thing is talking about the same thing, it is coherent, it is logical, it makes sense. But if I say I'm talking about tomato soup, and then I talk about tomatoes, then I talk about bananas in my second paragraph, then I talk about herbs and spices, that's not coherent because bananas have nothing to do with it. Make sense? It's not consistent. Polarization and to polarize is very similar. It's to divide sharply. Multitask is doing more than one thing at a time. So for example, if you are making food for your family and you're listening to the lecture or you're listening to a podcast, you're multitasking. You are doing two things at once.
Yes.
Interpersonal is relationships between people, so connections between people. Paraphrasing means that you take so let's say I give you a lesson and you want to go home and teach that lesson to your child. You don't use the same words, but you keep the lesson. So then you paraphrase what I said because you're not using exact quotes. You paraphrase it, you change the words, but the meaning is still the same. Okay? So let's say, for example, your mom taught you how to make tomato soup. When she taught you how to make tomato soup, you used very specific words, or she used very specific words. When you tell me how to teach, let's say you want to teach me how to make tomato soup, you use different words, some of the same ones, but different words, not exactly as your mother told you. So then in that case, you are paraphrasing what your mother said to me. Sustain, oh, this is 18. Sustain means to strengthen or support physically or mentally, which means to basically be able to continue with something. So for example, if you want to run a marathon, you have to be able to sustain your running, which means if you want to finish, you have to have the strength to continue until the end. And the way you do that is by training, right? So sustainability, or to sustain, is to be able to continue with it. So if we're having a conversation and this conversation is about space, I have to know enough about space for me to hold that conversation with you, to sustain that conversation with you. Conversationalist is someone who is really good at making conversations. Okay? And engaged, that is in this context. So it's not just about someone who's getting married, right? If you're getting married, then you're engaged, but not here. To keep someone engaged means to keep their attention. Okay? So if I'm giving a speech, I want the audience to be engaged. I want them to listen and I want them to interact. Okay, so that would be the audience is engaged. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so that's our vocab list for today.
Mm.